All right, it should be recording now. All right, hi everyone. This is Mike again, and joining me again, welcome back, Michael Ness. We are going to
Hello,
continue.
everybody.
We're going to continue with the platformer game engine that we started with in Construct 2 last time. And I don't know if you can tell. Can you still see my screen, Mike? Everything working fine on your end?
I can, yes.
All right, excellent.
Yep, looks
So
great.
I made quite a few graphical improvements since last time, just
I see that.
re-importing some of the art from the art packs. So, and we've got the Spriter animated trees in there now, so you can see that
Oh,
all the
cool.
moving leaves and stuff, and just sort of fix the scale of the tile set. Oh, look at that, the guy's hiding. So you can change the Z order in the editor, but that's kind of interesting. You can have the guy hiding in the tree leaves there. That was an
That's cool.
unintended feature, but very easy to fix
Yes.
in the editor. But oh, and you can also see, since last time, I tweaked the size, angle, and duration of the little dust cloud that kicks up, so they're not
Yeah, I
giant
see that.
anymore, and it looks a little more polished. So I'll just quickly show. So there's that level. Oops, started pressing the wrong key. And there we go. But anyway, oh, check out this cool feature I added. All right, see this bottomless drop here. If you look, I'm going to scroll down. You see that foreground area of grass there that obscures.
Yeah.
Now, if I go low below that, I'm going to fall potentially to my death here, and you're going to see
Okay.
what happens to that foreground layer that would be blocking my view. Did you see how it faded? I don't
Oh,
know how
wow.
the screen share
I
is.
did, yeah.
So yeah, so that'll nicely fade out of view to get out of your way if you sort
That's
of go
cool.
behind it. So a nice little feature. Eventually I'm going to add a sort of trampoline or springboard right here. And I'm going to add jump
Okay.
through platforms, so there'll be like a little bridge up there or something, so you could get under here, and then you can get sprung up, and you'll go flying up and land back up top. So you know,
Cool.
like in a game, you could put like a hidden life or gem or power up down here, and then
You're right.
So right now there's no
You
way
get
out of here
back to
except
the
to die.
thing.
But I just wanted to show
All
you
right.
that
All right. Oh,
that
no.
fading feature.
Very cool.
So, oh, and the other thing I did in Construct 2, normally when you enter, when you add a Spriter object, let's go to the Spriter page, where is it? Excuse me, Spriter, okay. So these are the actual Spriter objects, which as you can see, they don't have a built-in, like a preview thumbnail themselves that represents the animation, like the first animation in the Spriter file.
Yeah.
So it would be annoying in a level editor to have to place these indescript rectangles around in your level and sort of guess what the finished level is going to look like. So what I did is I created regular Construct 2 sprites that have the first frame of the animation from the Spriter file in it. So as you can see, let's see, go to layers, unlock foreground. Let's see. Oh no, it's not foreground. There we go. Yeah, it's gonna be a pain in my butt. I need the Z order thing. Okay, so here you can see these tree sprites, and so you could say I called it placeholder, wilderness tree placeholder. And so now you can put
Yeah.
these sprites wherever you want it and even scale them. You could see this one's much smaller. You can just scale them. I'm even going to make it so you could even rotate them. I haven't done that yet, but you could even rotate
Okay.
it like this, for example. We'll put this tree on a fairly severe angle so we can see it's
Yeah.
definitely working. So the idea is any scale, you make this actual tree, the tree sprite. So now you can see what you're doing when you're making your level design in the editor. So then I
Yeah.
have in the code, I have on the start of the layout for each tree sprite. So I create a loop that's going to go through every last instance of the tree sprite. So what it
Okay.
does is that particular tree sprite image or tree sprite will spawn one of the spriter versions of itself in the same location, and then it will take this tree, the spriter tree, and it'll set its scale to match the scale of the tree sprite, and then it will also put its Z order, this move behind, basically makes it take the same Z order position as the sprite, and then it destroys the sprite itself. So
nice.
at the split second the level starts, it replaces all of the placeholder sprites that are nice for visual editing the level. So it's just for the convenience of the level designer to be able to actually see what they're doing and carefully design the visual appearance of the level without all the guesswork of like placing an indescript rectangle, running it, and going, oh no, it needs to be up a little bit or a little bigger or smaller. So, and I did the same thing for torches in another level. So, and then the one last thing, so let's say I'll add now, I'm going to make its angle match. So tree, I just realized something that might be a little annoying for a second. Hold on a second. So tree, we're going to set its angle now. So size and position. Where is set angle? I see move at angle. That's weird. Let's see. Oh, angle. There it is. Set angle. And then we're going to retrieve the angle of the tree sprite, which I forgot what I called it. Tree. Wilderness tree placeholder. And retrieve its angle. Angle. So let's see if it works. What might happen, and I think this will be the case, is the trees might all be on their side. So let's see if that happens. And I know exactly how to fix it if that's the case, but let's see. Oh, I have to drag it into the proper screen. Oh no, it's good. So it matches. Excellent.
Yeah, cool.
So now you could even, like, I'm going to be using the same methodology for all of the background objects that are animated in Spriter. So as you can see, it makes it really nice when you're editing the actual level to not worry about that. So, all right. So
now, are Spriter objects supported in Construct 2 natively? I mean, are they?
No, it's through
some kind of add-on?
Yes,
created.
Right. It's a plugin. That's a very good question. Once I broadcast this stream, I will. Let me make sure it's still recording. It looks like it is. Good. Be paranoid about that during the whole stream.
Right.
So let me find that actually. I'm on the other screen, so this is only going to take a moment for me to go to the forum, and then there is Spriter implementations. And then, so in the forums at brashmonkey.com/forum, there is a section called Spriter Implementations, and there is a thread called Using Spriter Animations in Construct 2. And if you click on that, then there is pretty thorough text instructions as well as videos, and that has a link to make sure you get the latest version of Spriter, the latest version of Construct 2, and the plugin. Where's the link to the plugin? Oh yeah, hit right here, step 2. So you just click the little red here text, and that'll bring you to the download file for the plugin, and then you have to unzip it and then put it in you find the install folder for your Construct 2 install, and then you go to what is it called? Let me see. Hold on a second. So for me, it would be C, Program Files, Construct 2, and then Exporters, HTML5, and then so right here is where you would, so when you unzip the Spriter plugins, there's going to be a plugins folder, or it might just say SCML, So you would just copy that entire SCML folder right in here to exporters HTML5 plugins in your main Construct2 install folder. And then once you
Cool.
do that and then run Construct2, you'll have Spriter support. But the video and the tutorial explains everything step by step. So as you can see, there's several videos that cover different aspects of things.
Yeah.
Yep. And yeah, it exports to HTML5. So it should, in theory, run on everything, but I've heard it might depend on which of the quote-unquote wrapper methodologies you use. I haven't had a chance to test it yet. I think I mentioned in the last stream that Scira now offers an online, for Construct 3, they offer an online sort of export service, and we need to test it on that, but neither of us own Construct 3 yet. But the Spriter plugin does now work for it, so we need to test that. But I've already tested it with the normal export of Construct2 for HTML5 and Node WebKit, which does the PC, Windows, and Mac versions, and it runs perfectly fine on all of those. So if there is an issue with any, especially the official online Construct export, then we'll definitely make sure to get that fixed as soon as we can. But theoretically, it should export for everything just fine. And if it's not, then it's probably a relatively easy fix. Hope it might be on their end, so it might depend. It might be something that we need to report to them and then they fix. You know what I mean? So we'll see. But in general, it works perfectly out of the box, at least for Node WebKit and HTML5. Anyway, so what else was I? Oh yes, so the thing I wanted to start showing you, I was near the end of our previous stream. I was showing you the boss, and the boss's level looks very different now. So the other graphical thing that I've been doing is improving the tile sets and adding different tile sets for each level. So now the auto scroll level looks like this, and I added, oh, that's not going to work right now. But anyway, so fall to my death there. And as you saw, that did the same fade out trick on the foreground layer, so it's not in your way as you fall to your death, because you need to see the fear in your character's eyes.
That's true.
As he plummets.
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay, so
I like how the clouds have dust on them.
Yes, that's important. Yes, dusty clouds. That's a good point. I could actually add a little. Remember how I mentioned there are sub events? So that's an excellent example. So I'm going into the event editor, and let's see. So I can do a search for dust, and there's that one event that triggers the creation of dust.
Yeah.
So what I could do is I could add different effects. Like, for instance, I could make a more cloudy mist come up off of the ground if you land there. So one thing that I could do is I could sort of break this apart. I can add oh yeah, let's do this. This will be interesting. So I'll copy this entire thing, but then I'm going to drag this and make it a sub event. Oops. Okay, no, I can't yet. Hold on. Delete that. Now it's a sub event, and now I'm going to delete this stuff. So this is going to do nothing, but it's just going to check, have you landed? And if that's true, it's going to do all this stuff, but now I can put qualifiers in here, like add a new condition, and we can say, for example, I have a little sprite attached to the bottom of the invisible platformer rectangle called feet collide, and that basically is what is used to detect the collision when you're bouncing off of enemies, or this can also be used to sort of detect what kind of platform you're on. So we could say if this is overlapping, let's see, is overlapping another object, and then we could choose that cloud platform. Moving cloud, done. So then we could do invert, and then we could again do the other version and invert that again. So now, so it'll do this initial check, right? And then we'll do, okay, if you did just land and you're not on a cloud, then create this, and I would replace the dust with a different sprite that looks different, or I could add that as another animation or other animation frame, since it's just a one frame sprite, like it's not animated. So it could generate a different, basically, particle effect depending on the given situation.
Cool.
So actually, I'll just do that right now. I'll just quickly do placeholder art in construct here with the dust particle. Where is the dust particle? That's a good question. Where on the, oh, I'll just edit it here. That's easier. So here's the little dust sprite. So I'm going to add a frame, and then so we'll just draw a more cloud colored. Let's gray it out a bit. Make it very light. And then I'll use the brush, but I'm going to reduce the hardness, smooth it, reduce the hardness to like 20, and I can change the opacity to something like 60, and I'll just draw something like this. Add some white to it, there we go, and then make sure its anchor point is in the right place, or its pivot point. Excuse me, so now I have to go to its animation settings for its default animation, and we're going to change its animation speed to 0 so that the dust doesn't transform into water vapor when you land on the floor. And that's all good. So now we're going to close this, and so now we're going to keep this all the same, and because this is all going to be the same, we can throw that up there. So no matter what, it's going to create that dust sprite. But now what we can do is then have the conditionals. Is it overlapping a cloud sprite? And if it is not, then we're not going to do anything actually, so we don't even need this. But now if it is overlapping the cloud, then we can change its frame to frame 1. Done. So now theoretically, let's see if this works. Oops, it keeps appearing on the other screen. But now it should create a water vapor cloud when I'm... Oh, it did it for the first one, but not the second one.
For the first one, yeah.
Yeah, I know why that's happening, so no problem.
Sure.
We can fix that.
Cool.
But as you can see, it's mostly working.
Yeah.
Okay, so there. So you can see what I'm doing here is I'm creating 2 of them. But this here only is...
Oh, so it's the frame for 1.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess the easiest way to handle this right now without messing around and getting confused is indeed to do, I'm going to undo for a bit to get back the 2 separate variations. And I'm just going to add the set animation, let's see, dust, set frame to 1 for both. So it creates it, it creates it, it changes its angle, and it sets the animation to 1 for each of them. If it is indeed overlapping, if the player's foot detector is overlapping the cloud sprite. All right, that should work, but let's see if I accidentally, when I undid the new art I created in the dust clouds frame. Let's see. No, it's still there, and the animation is still set to a speed of 0, so we should be good. So let's see if that worked as intended. Yep. There we go. So I get dust when I'm not on a cloud, Then when I land on a cloud, I get water vapor.
Very neat.
Very cool. So not too difficult. That's the great thing about Construct 2.
No.
Even very specific things custom to your particular game. And obviously, you can create any kind of 2D game. You know what I mean? It could be like an overhead, car racing game or space shooter or, a text adventure, any kind of non-3D game. You can really prototype incredibly quickly once you understand the basic ways to control things, add sprites, and edit general logic. It's very, very fast and easy to learn. So we'll save our progress. Very important thing to do frequently. Anyway, so there's that. So yeah, the other thing I've been doing is adding the tile sets and carefully editing the collision. Like I think I showed you this before. If you go into tile map, I don't know if you could see that little red line there.
Yeah, I can see that there.
Okay, so you have to hand set the collision mask for each tile. And especially for angled slopes, it is extremely important to make sure that, oh look, this is kind of cool, in the view, you can choose show collision polys. So now every object and every sprite, you'll see a red lines designating the actual collision mask that you've created for each thing. So it's really important there is a 1 or 2 pixel threshold for your, like if you're for the platformer behavior. If you have too big of a jump of a little like offset, like a stair step for where one tile meets the other, like this one I should really tweak. It's too high, so I could find that like it's not causing problems, but I want to be safe if someone changes the platformer movement speed to be really slow. The slower something is moving, the more picky it is about that offset. And so if I'm not careful, if I don't set this more carefully, it's possible if someone creates a very slow moving enemy, the enemy will get stuck there and won't continue walking up the slope or down the slope. So I can edit that. It would be nice if they changed or added a feature to Construct 2 where you could actually set oops, that's the wrong one. So it's this one. If you could set the threshold of how sensitive it is to that, because oops, I did it the wrong way. Because it can be time consuming to perfect these. That's pretty good on that end, so I just need to bring this down a tiny bit. So anyway, if anyone is ever doing making a platformer game in Construct 2 and their player or enemy is seemingly getting stuck for no reason, that's almost certainly why. So anyway,
interesting.
as you can see, so I've been working on that, just making sure, like even if someone changes the art now, these like completely replaces the tile set with their own tile set image, so long as you keep the same tiles in the same place, like the same slopes and things, then you won't have to do this. I've done all the work for you.
Very nice.
So that'll be a nice thing for people that end up getting this engine. So anyway, back to the boss. So as you can see, I've got the same thing, regular sprite placeholder images for the spriter animated torches, and they're all replaced on the fly when the level begins. So let's quickly get to the boss, and you can see the current messy state it's in. There we go. So as you can see, we've got pretty
nice waterfalls. Very cool.
And the cool thing about that particular waterfall method, which is quite effective, we could add particle effects to it to make it even better. But that's just one image that was created to seamlessly loop. And then all I have to do is, I'll show you that in a second. Oh, there's my moving platform, or a vertical moving platform. And the really amazing thing in Construct 2, if you're using the default like standard platformer movement, what's really impressive, if you give any of the movement behaviors like sine wave, this is a vertical sine wave, it just works automatically with the platformer behavior. So I didn't have to create a subroutine of events that says, if the player's overlapping a platform and the platform moves, then make sure you move the player too, which is
Oh,
the
wow.
case in most other games. Oh, there's a bug. I know how to fix that though. That's because that's a jump through platformer movement. So you can see how I can jump up through the bottom.
Yeah.
So yeah, because I jumped and it was moving up quickly, it caused a problem. But anyway,
I see.
in general, it works perfectly, especially if it's a solid object. But anyway, so I'll get to that in another stream because it's a little bit more complicated to fix that particular issue. But
Okay.
so let's get to the boss here. And as I mentioned before, there's the original boss that was not Spriter, and then the one that's on top now is the Spriter animated one. And I've just added it generates, if you see the original regular sprite one. Sorry if I'm yelling. The original sprite one, the flame is built into the animation, which is extremely wasteful of graphics memory. And so let me go into the objects for that and find the boss sprite. So here's the boss sprite, and you can see he only has 4 animations, which is good, but he's a relatively large sprite. And so as you can see, he has a 20 frame animation to breathe fire. So it has to be pretty jumpy to save memory. And so the fire effect is only going to look so good, and it's just very wasteful. So now this whole character is animated with a few body part images. And in the Spriter version, actually I'll load up Spriter. Let's see, where is Spriter? There it is. Alright, so here is the actual... So this animation is an invisible collision box. So, oops, where did he go? It's a collision box that... So the player can't even see this, but this is what I use now to activate the other boss animations. So when you come onto the area of the level where the boss is, you can't even see it, but it's playing this invisible animation with this invisible collision rectangle, and I have it programmed so that this rectangle is called trigger box. So as soon as the player collides with this in the Construct 2 engine, then that triggers the intro animation for the boss. So the boss comes dropping down from off screen, and
Cool.
I don't think you can hear it. I think when I started sharing screen with you, I'm not sharing my audio, but right here built into Spriter is an actual sound effect file.
Well, I can hear something.
Oh, good.
Sounds like an explosion of
Oh,
some
excellent.
kind.
Okay, I wasn't sure I saved my audio or was sharing my audio too, so that's great. So yeah, and you can see I can even scrub through the sound. Oh wait, I don't have it turned on. Hold on a second. There it is. So that can be really handy. Like, let's say I had a character talking or something, or I'm going to have to add a laughing sound file for the laugh animation. So I'll actually be able to scrub through and see exactly where the sound should sync up with the frames of the laugh, or lip syncing or something like that. Like if you need to hand lip sync,
Oh, neat.
it can be really handy. So not only do I have the sound in Spriter, but also I trigger. You can see here I have an event trigger called Quake at the exact same moment. So in Construct 2, I have an event that says untrigger Quake from the Spriter file or Spriter object, then basically change a variable which has a little subroutine I made which shakes the screen.
Oh, cool.
So I'll show you that in a minute. But anyway, so as you can see, it's a nice smoothly animated tweened boss character now that'll use far less graphics than the clunky old sprite version, which was choppily animated. And so now I can add a lot more. As you can see, there's a ton of animations, and it's going to be using most of them now. And so you could just do a lot more with your bosses or just large on-screen characters. So anyway, what's interesting is it's fire breathing now. it doesn't have the fire built into the animation now. So we can actually use a normal construct sprite with a nice animated flame and actually have it treated like, as you can see, I added a point there that appears right at that moment. And I have a variable set in metadata called shoot flame, which has a default value of 0. But when we get to the first keyframe of the actual part of the animation where he should be spitting, now shoot flame I have set to 1, and it stays 1 for the duration of that part of the animation. So I have a subroutine or a little event in, just an event actually in Construct2 that says if that value is set to 1 for shoot flame, then every so many fractions of a second, then emit at this point, at the angle of the point, so that way when this, oops, I'm having some kind of bug with the, let's see, if you restore zoom. So you can, if you can see that little point that I have created, which is just called point_000 by default. Not only does that set the location to spawn the flame, but even the angle. And so when you flip the animation in Construct2, the angle is also going to flip. So it'll automatically give me the exact trajectory I need for the flame, no matter which way it's facing. So
very neat.
That's how that's working. And then let me go back into Construct2, and so yeah, we've got a mess right now where we've got, if we look at the code, this is the event sheet for the boss. So this is all the boss specific events, and most of it is still controlling the old sprite and relying on the sprite. Like this is the part that makes it change direction.
Yeah.
And then this is the one that makes it shoot its flame out. So I have to eventually, like, in fact, this one here, I can completely remove because I have this now working with the spriter version in a separate event.
Okay.
Get rid of that. But anyway, so let me see if I can find, so let's see, Quake. All right, so you can see here my action, what's it called? My event is, or condition is, the boss2, which is the spriter object. If its event called Quake is triggered, then we take the camera object and we shake it. So that's a built-in behavior called shake.
Okay.
In the which you can give to any object, but because it's the invisible object that I have set to have a scroll to behavior, if I shake it, then the camera will shake, like the screen offset will shake. So I shake it, cool. And then what I do is, you can see in the spriter object I have in the metadata. So let's go back to intro. If I go into its metadata that I set for this animation, I created, why is this double click not working? Oh, there we go. I was in the wrong thing. So I have a variable I called Quake level, and its default is 12, which is like a mild screen shake. But then I set it to 20 in this case, because the entire boss just came falling from very high up. So I wanted it to be an especially violent screen shake. So I say if Quake is ever triggered, so I can trigger that in any animation I want. Like, for example, I'm going to eventually create an animation where the player does like an overhead swing and slams his fist onto the floor, and at that very moment in the animation his fist hit the floor, I'll trigger another Quake, but it'll be less violent than the one where he comes crashing down. So I can tweak for every animation, I could tweak how violent the screen shake could be just by changing that Quake level value in that particular animation.
Oh, neat.
No, I don't know if you could hear that, but my stomach just growled.
Time to make some breakfast.
Exactly. So anyway, so there's that, and that's how it works. I'm just the severity, the Quake will always last at the moment for 0.6 of a second. But if I want to, I could add another value, a variable into the Spriter object here in Spriter called duration or quake duration. So then I could affect both things, the severity of the shake and how long the shake basically takes to fade out back to a solid non-shaking screen.
All right.
But I don't see a need for that right now, but as you can imagine, it would be easy to do. I would just add a new variable in Spriter. I can show you how I would do that. I would double click on metadata, and then I can type in the name, which would be quake duration, and then I click create new variable, and then I can, this one I would want to be a number, so I'd keep it as a float decimal number. And then I could create its default value, which would be 0.6 in this case, since I like how that looks. And then create variable, and then that would be down here in this list. And then you go to any point, now that it's created, if I go to any point in the timeline and double click down here in the metadata, scroll down, I can choose active in key. And as you can see, that adds a keyframe in the timeline there. And now I can change its current value to whatever I want. So I could say, okay, for this animation, when it quakes, I want it to take twice as long to peter out, so we'll do 1.2.
All right.
Oh, yeah, 1.2. So anyway, that's how that would work, but we don't need to do that. Clear the search. So yeah, so one of the other things I do plan on doing, which it would be kind of boring for me to do right now, so I won't do it, and kind of time consuming. But as let me actually run this level again. The Spriter controlled boss doesn't currently turn around to face the player, so if you get behind him, that's a severe exploit you can take advantage of. He's pretty helpless. So I'll do the quick version of fixing that, which is just going to make him instantaneously pop and turn around, which is what he does now currently. Like the sprite version, the non-spriter version, will just instantly turn around. I don't know if you can see it behind the spriter version, but I wanted to do something more elegant since we're using Spriter now, and I'm going to actually create a turning animation for both when he's in the air and when he's standing, so that when you get on the other side of him, he actually does like a 2 or 3 frame turn animation instead of just teleporting to facing the other direction. And you know, the player does that, but in general, you want your player character to be as responsive as possible. So I don't consider it, and he's a much smaller character on screen, so I don't consider it worth it to add a turning animation. But for that big boss, and you know, he's pretty slow moving. I just killed him. I think it's worth it to give him a turning. Plus, that allows you. It allows you some strategy. Like, oh, if I figure out a fast way to get behind him, I can get a few hits off against him before he can turn around and, like, you know, punch me or throw fire. So it'll be worth it for him. So I'm going to take a longer method to eventually for the finished engine. But since I don't have that turning animation created yet, and it'll take a while to set up that variable, I'll just do it the sloppy way in a second, but which will be just like the sprite version. But what I plan on doing is going into the Spriter file and creating a variable, just like I showed you, that is going to be basically, I guess Boolean is what you would call it. It's going to be true or false. Can the character turn at this moment in time? So we'll actually be able to set it in a very granular way. So a great example would be like fire breathe tell. So before he actually starts fire breathing, he inhales like this, and he charges up his flame, getting ready to spit it out. So imagine if for these first several seconds, all the way up to very near the end, he's still able to turn and face the player, so he could actually sort of track the player. So if the player gets on the other side of him all the way up until here, the boss can adjust and turn to face the player. But
Yeah.
then after this threshold, he's stuck. Like once he's breathing the fire, we'll make it so he's stuck doing it in that direction. Well, like his eyes close when he does a flame, so we can say, sure, he's physically capable of turning, but he never
Right.
will because his eyes are closed.
Sure.
So then the variable for, we'll call it turnable, for example, since that's excellent English. So
Right.
we'll go double click on that, and it would just be turnable. And then create new variable, and then so we could do integer whole number. That makes sense. And then default value we could put to 1. So 1 will be on, which is yes, he can turn. So we'll create that variable, and then we can make it active. So we could, in any given animation, we'll set the current animation. If he can't turn at that moment, we'll set it to 0, and if he can turn, we'll leave it at 1.
All right.
So eventually that's what I'll do, and then I'll save it out as both the SCML and the SCON file format, and then I'll drag it back in to re-import it into Spriter, into this Spriter frame where I drag all my Spriter objects. That's just for the sake of being organized. Like
Okay.
the other way I could do it is I could import it to every last level, which you could imagine would get very confusing if I have like specific bosses for specific levels. In order to re-import that boss, I might have to like fish around and find which level was that again that
Sure.
boss is in, and then re-import it there. So the fact that I created a Spriter specific frame that's never displayed in the game, like the end user will never see this frame, but it allows me to quickly re-import and update any Spriter related object all in this one spot. So anyway, that's why I set it up that way. So to go back into the boss frame, oh yeah, and I mentioned the waterfall. So as you can see, there is something in construct that is called a tiled background object, which is not to be confused with a tile map object. So so we'll do back waterfalls as the layer. As you can see, it's just called tiled background 18. I'll rename that to waterfall loop. So when you double click on the canvas, you can create objects. You can see this is tiled background, and all this does is whatever image you draw or load into it, if you make the object bigger, it's always a rectangle, and if you make the object bigger in width or height, it's just going to keep repeating that one image as many times as it has to fill that new size. So that's why it's called tiled background object. But then they actually shouldn't have bothered calling it tiled background, because you can use it as an active object. You can use it basically like a sprite or even a HUD element. Like you can actually use this to create a nice HUD. Like let's say you wanted a life bar to have a gradient color. You could create it as a tiled background, and then you can set the width in the code based on how many hit points you have, so it'll just reveal more horizontally or vertically, however you code it. It'll reveal more of that one image based on, so like a clipping thing. It's basically, you could use it as a clipped rectangle that would change its size and how much of that, in this case the health bar, it shows depending on your health. So it's a very versatile thing that can be used for way more than backgrounds. So it can be misleading that they called it tiled background, just because that's sort of originally what they had in mind. But anyway, so if I create that object, it immediately goes into the editor, and you'll see I'll just scribble something. Let me bring back up the opacity to 255. So if I create a pattern here, let's see. Oh, there it is. Okay, so bring this back to 100. Make it fairly big. So I'll just make this wavy pattern, and we'll close that. And so you'll see, it just repeats that however big I want it, which is great. That's how I just undid a few times to get rid of that. But that's how I did this nice repeating, like far background, like you're in a cave, like this rock pattern. So it's just a really efficient way. And then these waterfalls are the same thing. So what I did was I created that object. I paid careful attention to the height of the actual image in pixels, and then I gave it a bullet behavior with a default speed of 400, set angle to no, and then I just have, let's see, what is this called again now? It's called waterfall loop. So I copied its name into the, what is that called, the paste bin or the clipboard, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm tired. I can't remember basic
It's all right.
terminology. So, but now I can go into the event editor for this, and that's in level events, and then I can paste that into the search, and now, oops, let me do that again. Press enter. And now these are the events for that. So on the start of layout, I take all of the waterfall loop. So if you don't do a for loop specifically, if you have an on start of layout, it'll still affect every last one since you don't have a qualifier. Like if I have a collision check first, then it will only affect the one that was collided. But because there's no qualifying event, like was it collided with, or is it it's variable a certain thing, or it's X position a certain thing, it's going to affect all instances. So I did waterfall loop, set its angle of motion to 90 degrees, which is going from up to down, so it's going downward now. So all of them move downward because let me tell you, by default it's going side to side, and that looks really freaky. And then I have another event that says if the X position Y position of this waterfall loop makes it to be greater than negative 436, because that's the height of the image, then I basically teleport it back to negative 872. So all this does, as you can see, I made the images, in 872 is exactly twice the image height. So what this is doing is it's moving this quite quickly downward, and then once it reaches a certain Y coordinate, it teleports back up like this seamlessly. So it just keeps doing this. So that's all it's doing. And then just because the one image was carefully designed to tile and to have variance in its opacity and a kind of wave shape, both in its detail, its texture detail, and as you can see, I made it do a kind of sine wave in its vertical aspect, I guess you could say. Then when we run it, you get a pretty nice waterfall effect with only one image and no particle effects, and it just keeps looping infinitely. So pretty effortless.
Yeah, it's very clever trick. I like it.
So you get an interesting effect when that's where the fact that it's only one image, the only time you hit a sort of visual limit is if you fall quickly and it's at the same speed, you get a weird effect where it looks like the waterfall is stopping in time, which is kind of cool. I think I've just proved Einstein's theory of relativity accidentally.
I think you have. Yeah, it does look really cool. I mean, you'd almost expect that in the real physics, right? Where you fall the same speed as the water.
Exactly. But obviously in reality there would be some variation of the water. There would be particles of water that would be moving separately and even bouncing off of each other or refracting light. So like I could do tricks to combat that, which I'll probably end up doing, where I will maybe overlap two of these very same waterfall images, but I'll make one of them the additive blending mode, so it basically brightens everything it's over, and I'll make them offset so that they're scrolling at two separate times. You know what I mean? So they're visually, even though they're the same image, they're offset. So it should create a very convincing sort of built-in moving water particle effect over the entire thing. Awesome. So I'll tweak that so that I'm not wasting any more graphics memory, but I end up with a much more lively. I mean, this is already quite nice, and if I were making this game only for mobile devices and even like older, weaker like iPhones and Android devices, then I would probably just leave the water like this. You know what I mean? Because it's already quite nice. but I'll probably add it and tell people in a video that'll be free with the engine that, hey, if there's any performance issues and you're doing a level with a lot of waterfalls, then you can just delete out the sort of additive overlay version for each waterfall, and that way you're moving and displaying several fewer large objects, in case performance is an issue. But anyway, so that's how the waterfalls work. And then, so let me just quickly do the boss thing. And then we've covered quite a bit, so if you want, we can end the video pretty soon after I cover this quick boss thing. It's up to you.
Okay.
If you have questions, by all means, I would love to answer them as well. But so
that's fine. I'd like to see the boss thing.
Okay.
So if that's going to be a place to end, then sure.
All right. Cool. All right. So here is the current ones, which are only affecting the boss sprite, which obviously, at some point, we need to completely remove all references to the boss sprite so that I can delete it and no longer be wasting that graphic memory in the game engine. As you can see, we have, this basically checks if the rectangle that is used to control the actual boss, if it is, just like with the player, there's an invisible rectangle I made for the platformer behavior. And so if its exposition is less than the exposition of the player, which means the boss is to the left of the player, like less than is to the left of on a number line,
sure.
Which I'm sure you know, but I'm just clarifying for anyone.
Right.
So if that's the case, then he's not doing the flame, because, as I said, in the game logic, he doesn't turn while he's blowing the flame. So if those two things are true, then we set the boss to not mirrored, because if you can see, by default he's looking to the right. So we should not flip the images if you're to the left of him, because if you're to the left of him, the boss should be looking to the right. So so it's set to not mirrored, and then we do the same thing if the inverse is true. If he's to the left, then he should be flipped, so he's looking to the left.
Okay.
I hope I said that right. I'm tired, but anyway. So
I think you did.
Yeah, so we're flipping them based on the actual default images, so we have to mirror it if he's on the opposite side of the player. So that's what these two things do. So let's see how we can swap this to be affecting the spriter object instead of the sprite. So let's see if there is a condition. So replace condition, and now we're going to use the boss spriter object, and we're going to see if there's a way to check if it's mirrored. I actually don't know. It's been a while since I looked for this. So if it is not available, there it is flipped on, is mirrored on x-axis. So we'll do that. Oops. Hold on a second. We don't even need to do that. We'll do it the same way, and we'll only limit his turning for if he's doing the flame animation. So we're going to replace the condition, and we're going to do compare current animation. And it's always good if you're using spriter objects in there. It's always good to have the actual spriter file open, so you can literally copy and paste the name of the animation to avoid any chance of misspellings, or I had it capitalized in spriter and not in, you know what I mean?
Sure.
So it's just a really convenient way to not end up with silly programming errors because you slightly typed a name differently. So there's that, and we need to invert that. So if the fire breathe animation is not playing, now we need to set it to not mirrored. Is he facing the same way by default? No, actually, look at that. So that's an important difference. In the spriter file, by default, he's facing the left, which is the opposite. So we're going to have to set it to mirrored instead.
Oh, okay.
So
that's a good catch.
Yeah, exactly. As they say, this is not my first rodeo. You learn
good
to
expression.
you learn to save yourself from common errors to save time if you've made that common error a couple million times in the past.
Yeah, right.
So let's see. That's not under angle. Is it under animation? Trying to find where you set the size and position. Set mirrored X. There we go. So if he is to the left, so he's facing right. Yeah, so this will have to be mirrored. So mirror X-axis. There we go. We can delete that. And so now we can just copy this and paste this, delete it, and so that's this. Oops, I'm replacing the wrong thing. Sorry about that. Let's try that again. So this is the one we need to replace right here, the boss sprite, and then we can copy this, and now we can double click on it to edit it and change it to don't mirror. So now he will actually turn just like the sprite does, but as you can see, there's still one issue, and that's we're also using a variable that I called movie, which is just supposed to be move, but in a lot of authoring systems like this, it won't allow you to name a variable the exact same thing as a sort of built-in attribute of an object or a movement type. So sometimes I intentionally misspell. In this case, like I'll just goofily add a EY or a Y sound to something, just to avoid using super common words like move. Let's see if that's necessary. It might not be. Oh, well, I can't edit it here. I have to go back to the other editor, but no big deal. But anyway, if I remember, I'll do that. But in general, I just learned to do that. If I'm using a variable name that's a super specific thing, like Y position or animation, then I'll intentionally misspell it or something just to make sure there's no potential conflict. And it'll give you a warning, I think. I don't think it'll create a bug or crash. It'll just warn you. Again, this is like, I've wasted time typing in something only to have it tell me you can't use that name. So I just instinctually, I'll goofily name any common word related to programming like move or something like that.
All right, good idea.
So anyway, so we're going to eventually have to use something else, boss related, to keep track of that variable. So I'll do that in a moment. But for now, we'll just do whether or not he is facing the player. So let's see if this works. So now when I get on the other side of him, he should actually be able to turn around, or he will automatically, I should say, flip around to face me. Oops, I have to drop down here. There he is, he's facing me right from the get-go.
Oh, cool.
So, and now I'll get on the other side. And did you see that? He flipped around.
Yep, I see that.
And I don't remember if I programmed the flame to, the new flame particle to hit me. Let's see. Nope. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. This is the last thing, I guess, for this stream, so that we can both get some sleep. Did I import the flame here? I think I did. Going to foreground. So yeah, so you can find, if you need to edit an object or find its name. I like to copy its name so I can do a quick search for it in the events. But anyway, so I found it here, but if you can't find it, you can always find it under objects. Any objects that are in the frame will be in this objects panel. Or you can go into projects and go down into object types, and you can find any object. And then you can click on it to edit its properties, or double click it to edit its animations or images.
Okay.
Alright, so what I need is to just find an event where the player gets hit by something. So I'm going to go into the actual level events, and I'm going to just type in hit, because I know the animation for getting a hit is called something like hit_1 for the player. So now I just need to scroll down and see. So here it is, player, set, animation, hit. So it has all this logic. This is for if the player hits the basic enemy. So I'm going to copy and paste this event. I will also at the same time copy the, what do you call it, the, wow, I can't think of basic
comment.
Words now. Comment, thank you so much. And I'll edit this to say the event below, oops. Oh no, this is right, okay. So it's just the wrong comment anyway, but this event below hurts the player if he contacts flame. Alright, so now, oh, that's interesting. We have a 4. Oh, that's because I have to test a lot more things. So I'm going to get rid of most of this.
Okay.
Like flame will always be harmful, basically. There's no harmless variable we need for it. And for those reasons, because it's much simpler, we don't need to do a for each loop through. So now I'm just going to right-click the specific thing and do replace object. And I should, and now it's asking, well, what object do I want to replace, this or this? So I have to pick the enemy, and now I can pick boss flame. So if boss flame is overlapping the invisible rectangle for the player, and the player is not flashing, this is the spriter object. So when the player gets hurt, I use a built-in flashing behavior for the spriter object, so it does that blink thing like in classic games for I think 3 seconds. It's something like 3 seconds. So now I can check and make sure you can't get hurt. So I just put is flashing set to negated. So anything, any event that is checking if you can hurt the player, if he collides with something, I have that condition, make sure he's not flashing, because while he's flashing he can't get hurt. So then I do all of these things. I even shake the screen in this case when the player gets hit for a little, to a small magnitude.
Right.
So then let's see here. Do we need to do anything else? So he set his vector Y, so he hops up in the air a little bit. He displays his getting hit animation. We subtract 1 from his hit points. We ignore his input until he's done playing the getting hit animation. Okay, so you can see here, set hit side. So I have a variable that I set. Whenever you get hit, it computes which side you got hit from by doing a little bit of math based on the x coordinate of the thing that hit you and you, the player. Right? So that's going to give you either a negative number or a positive number, and that'll tell it if it's facing left or right. So right now it's computing it based on the the basic enemy sprite. So let's see if replace object works. Yep, so basic enemy I will replace with the flame. So now I should be able to get hit with the flame, and depending on which side the flame is compared to me, it'll bounce me in the appropriate direction away from the flame instead of toward the flame that just hit me.
All right.
So let's see if this is working. So now I should be able to actually get hit by the flame, and then there's one little last tweak I will do once I verify this is working. Sorry everyone, I seem to be losing my voice. Let's see here. Alright, so here it is. Let's see how soon he does the flame. It's gonna stop on the other side. Come on, flame on. There we go. Yep, the flame hit me. The enemy, just so we can see. Yep, and I got killed by it. Okay, so that works great. And what we're gonna do, and we could do really cool stuff later, like I will create an on fire variable for the player, and I will create a fire particle. So like if you get hit by a flame for like a half a second, you'll be on fire, and then it'll sort of peter out as you're playing the hit animation. So we'll just randomly create in slightly randomized locations around the player sprite. He'll trail off a flame particle. So that'll be a really nice effect. So the last thing I want to do is let me look at the actual animation of the flame. Let's see, boss. Oh yeah, so like even in here, you can just start typing. Let's see, so where are my objects? Boss flame should be near the top. Where is it? If I remembered the exact name, I should be able to type it in. But I don't remember the exact name, I guess. Where is the flame? Oh wait, am I in the wrong... There we go, that's why it wasn't there. I was in the wrong frame. Alright, so anyway, boss flame. So let me double click either here or here to get up its animation editor. So I don't want it to be able to hurt the player anymore from this point on.
Okay.
So what we're going to do is we're going to add one more condition to the flame, and we're going to say if the frame is less than 4. So let me go back, go into the level events. I can type in, even a partial name works, I think. So let's type in flame and see if that... Yep, so boss flame. So even if you don't have the whole name, if you remember at least part of the name of something, you could still filter for it. So very convenient. And so then all we're going to do is add that other condition. So add another condition. So boss flame, compare frame, and is less than 4. So now those last mostly translucent or transparent frames of the flame, now if the flame is mostly petered out, it won't hurt the player at all, which I think will be much nicer. And then the other final thing I'll do, the other final thing, that's perfectly good logic.
Right, absolutely.
I back up my logic 110%.
I love it.
So let's see. So let's see what the collision mask is. So we can even tweak. As you can see, this flame gets a bit smaller over time. So we can even tweak the collision mask per frame so that no one ends up destroying their control pad or punching their monitor saying that was cheap, I didn't actually get hit. So we can carefully tweak the collision mask. These don't matter since it won't work on these frames. But, if I want to be really safe, in case I end up tweaking which frame can hurt you, now the collision mask is updated. So anyway, save my progress. And if you're interested in it next time, if you want to keep up with the progress of this project, then if you want, next time I can add the flame particle for when you get hit by the fire. I think that'll be a real nice addition. And actually, the other thing that's much more sophisticated to sort of get more advanced is to figure out a fix for... I'll recreate the bug, so to remind everyone. If I jump up and it's moving up, there we go, I fall through, which is definitely not a desired thing. So I'll figure out a way around that and then actually either reprogram it or show you the events I need to fix that particular issue. Oops, I died. But anyway, we know it works. We were there. I'll just quickly get there again just to verify everything.
So I guess one question that has been bugging me for a while here is, what is that red thing that you use as a power-up?
Oh,
it looks like a jelly bean.
Yeah, it's indescript. I needed it's going to replace eventually its placeholder art. But it's basically my thought at the time was, do you remember those gummy candies? Well, not exactly gummy, but chewy candies called hot tamales.
Yes.
Remember those? It's basically a hot tamale.
Okay.
At one point, it may have been a chili pepper, but it just while I was sketching it, it became basically like a hot tamale candy. But it definitely was not meant to be.
I was debating whether or not it was like a kidney or a spleen, or
exactly, or just a red bean. But no, it's it's currently an indescript thing. I mean, that's obviously something that someone that's making a game and wants their game to be pretty custom would probably want to change the art of things like that. But as you can see, it's working. It'll look a lot better once basically gets caught on fire. I could even make a, if you remember what character maps are in Spriter, if I want to, I could even create, for the player, I won't bother opening up the player Spriter file, but I could create a character map that would actually swap out images. So while he's on fire, I could make him look kind of reddish and scorched and things like that.
Oh, cool.
But I probably won't go to that extent. There's also built into Construct 2, you can actually add like hardware accelerated. I can't think of what they're called. Like a filter effect. I can't think of what those are called right now. But
shader or something.
Yeah, a shader. Thank you very much. Yeah, so you can add custom shader effects. So I could switch the player's hue, saturation, and value when he's on fire, and then potentially even fade that back down to normal if I want to be really fancy, like as he's becoming less inflamed, less engulfed in flame. He could change back to his normal colors.
All right.
The only downside with using that system, obviously, is if someone ends up playing on a system that does not support shaders, then shaders are just ignored. Yeah. So for this basic version of the engine, I'm avoiding using shaders, but there's a lot of really cool effects you can do with shaders. And almost everything supports shaders now, but like I said, someone might end up playing the game or exporting the game for an older platform that does not necessarily support shaders. So game developers out there, keep that in mind. And also some systems, you'll get a performance hit quicker if you have several shader effects going, especially if it affects the entire screen or layout. Oh, and I mentioned you can do, so I'm going to add that feature too, so that's another thing we can do if you want to do a next stream to continue this thing, if you're interested in continuing to learn C2. I will add, when I add the trampoline sprite object, I'll do the thing I mentioned in the other platformer engine I made, where when you bounce off, that particular springboard will tell the game how far out I should pan so that you can see more of the level. But the other thing that you can do that I haven't mentioned yet that's really cool is you can rotate either the entire game smoothly or a specific layer. So we could actually add a really cool, I won't do this to the basic engine, but like if you wanted to make a game where like you push a button and the entire world rotates 90 degrees or something like that, you could actually do that. So very, very powerful. And as you can see, incredibly easy to use authoring system.
It is.
So really quick for doing stuff. But I guess I will end it there. I hope I didn't forget a specific thing. Do you have any other questions or?
I don't think so. Not at the moment. This is really cool to see how you do this.
Oh, cool. I'm glad you're enjoying it, and I hope other people are liking it too, and it encourages people to try it out. Like I said, there is a free version of Construct that is there. I wanted to show you that I added spikes there. So which is a very basic thing. I don't like, currently it plays a silly sound when you touch them, so I will definitely fix that later, but like you bounce off of them instead of immediately dying.
Yeah, I hear that bounce sound.
So, oh wow, there was an enemy down there. That's weird. Did you see that?
What is?
Oh, I know. It's because he
falls
falls down. That's why it's doing that. It's actually not a bug in the code. It's the fact that I'm actually bouncing off the enemy. It's saving me for a split second. It's saving my life. Nice. What a nice enemy. So what I'll do, which will be really cool, is I'll add an event. I won't do this now, but next time if you remind me or if I don't forget, I'll add an event for the enemies. So if the enemies fall into the spikes, they'll die too. And that'll fix the problem. And that way we could even do things like imagine how cool. So here it is, like you see this flying enemy?
Mm-hmm.
So we'll make it so that these guys die if they fall into spikes. So you'll be able to kill this guy by bouncing off of him. He'll turn into a regular guy. He'll fall to his death. And you can bounce off of him to make it. So I can make a long segment in a level of spikes that are impossible to get across unless you bounce off of a sequence of these guys. So you'll be killing all of these guys as you bounce. It'll be a kind of comical,
that's cool.
fun gameplay element, part of a level where you have to basically make all of these guys in sequence fall to their death to get across. So yeah, that'll be cute.
So one other question: what is the golden head? Like his head turns golden sometimes.
Oh yes, that is placeholder. As I mentioned, character maps in Spriter. Yes. I want the character to change how he looks when he has the ability to throw fireballs when you grab the hot tamale.
Sure.
So just for the sake of super quick placeholder, so I could keep programming but make sure the feature works and then do the art later, I just quickly in Photoshop or whatever I use, probably Krita, just changed his head to be the silly golden color. But that was purely like the fastest thing, the fastest hack I could come up with to just quickly create art to do a character map so that I could get back into Construct 2 and make sure the feature works.
Makes sense.
So a lot of time that's how, like that's the best way. If you're working on gameplay, you don't want to slow yourself down making art, like really nice finished art, and then make the feature work. Because very often, like if you do that, once you're done taking all this time making pretty art, you'll make the feature work, and then you'll realize either, oh wow, this feature is way less fun than I thought it would be, so I'm not going to go with the idea, and now you've just wasted potentially days making these animations or art for this feature that is worthless. Or what happens even more often is after you've made the art and then you program it to work, you realize, oh crap, I need to make this animation look totally different because it doesn't work. Like it looked great in the animation program, but based on the gameplay physics, the way it has to actually behave in the game to be fun, it can't look like that. And like that's a huge problem that existed working in the industry as an artist. If the programmer and the artist are very separated, right? Because like you're on, you're members of a team, but they're in their own department. And then you have, scrums. Almost every development studio uses something called Agile, which is like a whole system of team organization and planning where you have meetings, you plan out features, you delegate tasks and create priority, all this stuff. So what happens very often is after the meeting, the programmer has on his list, I have to program this behavior for the game, this feature, this move, or whatever. And then the artist has the same thing, but in their heads are two different things.
Right.
And the programmer will program it to behave one way, and the artist is drawing it, thinking it's going to behave another way. And then when you see the quote-unquote finished product after that particular sprint, it's called a sprint in the Agile system, it's a segment of time, usually a week or 2 weeks, where everybody's doing those things from the list they made of tasks. You might already know all about Agile, but just in case someone that's watching doesn't know about the Agile system.
Sure.
Right, so you end up playing the game to see the new feature, and it looks terrible. Like you created a gorgeous animation based on the physics in your head, and then the programmer programmed it in a completely different way, and it ends up looking absolutely terrible because you weren't working on the thing at the same time. Yep. So that's why it's really much better. It's great if an artist can do both, or using an authoring system like that, that's possible. Like even an artist can make a great game and can simultaneously work on how the move or a feature actually works physically. And then, it's much better to make the animation after the fact once you know exactly how it has to behave, because then the artist can perfectly tailor the animation to look right with that particular movement or physics or whatever. Or timing is another really critical thing. So yes, I can tell you, it was an eye-opener for me. One of the first really good projects I was working on was a Batman from the first, I think it was, we got the rights to do, I think it was from the first Nolan Batman movie. We got the rights to make the mobile game. So I was really excited. I was a lead artist on it, so I was doing all the Batman animations. And I animated this cool, sort of flying knockdown move that you could do, if you're sneaking up on enemies or whatever.
Yep.
And, there I was animating it based on a very specific set of physics I had in mind, and the programmer just did his own thing, and they were so unsimpatico that this really cool animation looked ridiculously silly and feeble. Like, you know, he may as well have been doing a little what's that little ballerina move where you spin around. Like, Batman may as well have been doing like a really
pirouette or something.
Yeah, like a Batman may have well have put a finger on the top of his head, you know, like you know what I mean. It done something really ineffectual and weak looking on his way to the enemy, and then the enemy collapses. Like, it looked so terrible. So luckily I had time to tweak the animation when all was said and done. But even then, like, it was kind of rushed, and it wasn't as ideal as if I saw the physics of what needed to happen the way the programmer programmed it, and then made sure the animation looked as cool as possible based on that. So it's just an interesting side note for artists or game designers in general. Don't ask for art and then implement it. Implement the feature with placeholder art, even if it's rectangles, even if you have to draw your own stickman. Because it's much better if the artist can see exactly what has to happen and the timing and the physics, and then create the art and animations based on that. You'll save you'll save a lot of time, and you'll end up with a much better looking, you know, and you won't end up with a emasculated Batman.
Well, that's great advice.
Yes.
I was just wondering if maybe the golden head had some symbolism or something, you know, like.
Yeah, it's very obvious. I don't understand why you're not picking up on this hot tamale symbolism.
Yeah,
clearly, if you reveal a giant hot tamale from a question mark block, clearly
your head will turn to gold. I mean, that's.
I don't know.
I guess I've been living under a rock lately.
Yeah. So anyway,
awesome, man.
Yeah, so I had as always, a great time explaining this stuff, and I'd love to keep going with this with you. Like I said, I'll do a few, just like I did some superficial things, you know, outside of streaming with you, just to keep progress going that I can then quickly review with you. But I'll save some of the bigger, more important things to do during the stream, so that we could really go step by step, and you can ask questions as we go. Like that question you asked in the previous stream, that was fantastic. That led to me explaining more about sub events. Oh, and the really great thing that, like, I was in a bad habit and I wasn't going to use the OR block, if you remember that, for the inputs.
Yes, I do remember that.
Yeah, so that you helped the video be much better and more educational, showing people the right way to do something instead of the wasteful way that would have had a lot of redundant events the way I was going to do it. So
I just don't know the questions not to ask, Mike. So.
Yeah, there you go. So there's that embarrassing golden head hot tamale thing, but
right. Well, I appreciate you having me on for these. This is really interesting, and learned a lot about this. This is a different kind of programming than I've ever done. The visual programming is really interesting.
Yeah, and we really do have going back full circle to the Amiga thing, which we come from the classic Amiga community. We very much have Francois Lyonnais to thank for, like, going back decades now. I think he was, not only did he create Amos, which is a basic programming language specifically for game makers, which was fantastic on the Amiga, but eventually when things moved over to Windows PCs, he created an entire line over the years of authoring systems like this that he called Click and Create. And the first one, I think, was the Games Factory, or one of the first ones, and then it became Multimedia Fusion, and now Fusion, which is at 2.5. They are soon, and I think soon to release, or relatively soon to release, Fusion 3, which is a massive improvement over the current ClickTeam Fusion, which is already an excellent authoring system, very similar to Construct. But Construct 2 here was actually made by a user of Fusion that ended up wanting some very specific features or changes, and he ended up creating his own authoring system, which is very, very inspired by Fusion. So yeah, Francois, he sort of started it all with creating incredibly easy to use, easy to learn authoring systems that opened up indie game development to very small teams, or even just to people that are like before, as an artist myself, if I wanted to create a game, I pretty much had to find and convince or be able to pay a programmer to make the game happen. Or it was a very, very daunting, like making just the art for a game is already a massive undertaking. Like it takes a lot of time, especially if you want things smoothly animated and nicely detailed. So the requirement to learn a real programming language, spend all that time learning it and the syntax, and then doing all the typing and worrying about errors and stuff like that. Like these kind of authoring systems, and Francois specifically, empowered so many creative people to be able to
absolutely. I know, thanks to him, like I learned how to program.
Yep.
It's been a very lucrative career choice for me, and then generations of programmers coming back from the Amiga and all the way up through the more modern click team fusion kind of authoring systems. I mean,
right.
It's hard. It's hard to understate how much Francois himself has impacted the games community and just programming in general for generations.
Yep, that's for sure. So many members that ended up becoming professional game developers, and even like hardware developers of the Amiga community, like they fell in love with development on the Amiga specifically because of Amos, and then later on PCs because of the click and create line that and now some of the most popular games, like that whole what is it called, Weekend at Freddy's, I think, is that what it's called? Something like that, something at Freddy's. It's really, really popular. I'd remember the name if I weren't so tired, but like that was made with Fusion, and
cool.
like the guy made himself I would imagine probably a millionaire by now. He's got like a movie deals for this game franchise he created with an authoring system very similar to the one I'm showing you now, and he's not alone. Like a lot of games that became really popular were made with the software, and like teams of one person.
Amazing.
Another really cool game that was made by one person, I think using an engine like this. I don't know for sure. I never checked. I never asked him or looked to see if he had mentioned it. But if it was not made with Fusion or Construct, it certainly could have been. But there's a game out there called Axiom Verge, which was made by one person, and he, made to look like a retro NES style game, a really nice quality game. And yeah, he one guy, like these days with these kinds of authoring systems, especially if you make a retro style game, which doesn't require entire teams and millions of dollars to make cinematics with ridiculous production level, you can make a great game that can become very popular. You have to be very creative and you have to invest a lot of work, but now it's very possible, which certainly was not the case in the past. Or it would just take far, far longer. You'd have to lock yourself in your mom's basement and spend a couple of years becoming a recluse and learning how to program and do art. And so now it's much more accessible, and we all benefit. Not only the creative people obviously benefit from it, but there are so many great games out there now that are created by people that don't know how to program in real programming languages. So it's great stuff that I certainly very much appreciate. And I'm sure a lot of other people do. So anyway, I could ramble on forever about this, but I had a great conversation, and I'm glad you're enjoying it, and I hope other people are too. And so let's schedule for our next stream sometime soon, and we can continue making progress on this. And then, like I said, when it's done, I will release a version without all the pretty graphics, free for Spriter owners, and then there will be a version you can buy for not too much money that you can that will come with all this art royalty free, ready to use for non-artists. You could still create a game and sell it commercially or give it away without worrying about giving Brash Monkey a cut or anything. That's the company that cell sprider and stuff like that. But anyway,
Awesome.
I'm starting to ramble, so I will let you go. Had a great time.
All
Thanks
right.
very much, and
Thank you.
everyone who ends up watching this video once I stream it.
All right. Take care.
Yeah.